really torn, and I really don't know how I feel about all this Republican rioting and wanting to tear down the government, and all these Republicans wanting to tear down the government, and all these people with guns charging the government. And I don't know how I feel about that, because I truly believe we need to dismantle the government and rebuild from the bottom up. The laws are broken. We have put too many loopholes in there for the rich. Our politicians are taking bribes from lobbyists and just putting different words to it. They're just changing the language. So, of course, we cannot fix this at the top or the middle. Maybe at the bottom, but then the top can block the bottom from doing anything. So, it's just an unfixable problem. And the last time something like this happened, the solution was tear apart the whole government and put a new government in its place. That's usually the idea. If a government is failing the people and 60% of the population is living paycheck for paycheck, 20% of the population is in poverty, and a good 80% of the population is like literally wondering how they're going to survive 5 years from now. Meanwhile, 1% of the population has never seen more money. They can't spend their money fast enough. Corporations are reporting record profits. 3 companies own our whole food supplies. Everything's getting consolidated into a monopoly again. We're having the barons again. We got the you got the barons. You got the rich people trying to own things. You got our government fucked up. You got rich people wanting loopholes. Like, I'll give you an example. 11 states in the United States will not allow you to record. Let's say somebody admits to murdering your wife. A rich billionaire comes over and says, I murdered your wife, so what? And you say, I got a recording of you saying that. And then the rich guy goes, ha ha ha. I live in California. I live in Massachusetts. I live in New York. I live in New Hampshire. I live in Florida. These are the rich havens. And wouldn't you, it's kind of funny that all the rich havens, all 11 rich haven states, have one party recording. Why would they have that? Two-party recording means that if you commit a crime and somebody records you, you can use it in court. That's just two people. One, you're giving permission to yourself to record yourself, and anybody talking directly to you in a two-person conversation can be recorded too. 39 states have said that two-party recording has done a lot of good for their state. It helps criminals get caught, especially when they admit to a crime. It helps the police officers do an easier job. It helps detectives catch people easier. But why do these rich haven states not want two-party recording? Why do they need one party? Why do they want to keep one party permission in these 11 states? Well, because rich people, if they get caught with a crime, right, they hire a good lawyer and they get off the hook. There's a system in New York and in Massachusetts and in California that allows a billionaire to get out of trouble by just hiring a $40,000 or $1 million attorney. So by doing that, they have a loophole. O.J. Simpson does a murder, he gets out scot-free. A guy who's a bum beats up his wife, he goes to jail for life. But if there's two-party recording, then these billionaires can be caught by detectives and people right on the record, right on camera. And if these billionaires and if these rich people are caught on camera, they can't hire an attorney to get out of trouble anymore. That loophole won't work anymore. So all the rich haven states will not allow rich people to be recorded by anybody else. If a billionaire murders your wife in a rich state like Boston or California or Miami, Florida, and he comes up to you, you're not allowed to record him. If you take a recording of a rich billionaire saying that he murdered your wife, as there's an open investigation for whoever's murdering your wife, and you record that billionaire with the recorder admitting to murdering your wife and how he did it, and you bring that recording to the police station, you will be arrested. Not the guy who just admitted to murder, not the billionaire that just murdered your wife. No, no, no. you will be arrested for recording the murderer admitting to the crime, because there is only one party permission. Sorry, it's two-party permission in that state. 11 states, you need two people to give permission. So the criminal that committed the crime has to give permission to be recorded. So no billionaire who just committed a crime is going to admit to a crime and then give permission to be recorded. That's never going to happen. It's very unrealistic. And if 39 states have found it easier to prosecute, the people who do their jobs like detectives have found their jobs easier to do, why not allow the recording of people? I mean, I get recorded when I walk on the sidewalk by cameras inside businesses. I know business cameras catch the sidewalks across the street and record people all the time. I know that street cameras record people all the time. You're always being recorded. So if you're always being recorded, what's the harm with just making a law that allows us to save on taxes, our detectives get an easier job, and the people that are committing the crimes go to jail and they don't get to argue their way out. They can't wiggle their way out. You got video, undeniable proof of the murderer admitting to their crime, so that helps. But no, these rich haven states want to make sure their loophole stays intact. So I don't know how I feel about the Republicans trying to tear down our government, because I definitely don't want them being in charge of rebuilding it. We'll have a Nazi state for sure. It just won't be good. You need balance. You need balance, and Republicans don't even know the word of working with another type of party. They're not working. Works well with others was not on their resume. Work well with others is not on the rioters' resume for January 6th. That is not part of their deal. If they got to trample a security guard to get in the building, so be it. Working well with others is not their deal. So, yes, these Republican rioters might be good at destroying and tearing apart our government, but who's going to rebuild it? That is the problem. I am all for tearing down our local governments and rebuilding them better with better funding, make sure the rich pay their fair share, the laws work, the loopholes aren't there, judges can do their judge work without being all confused, innocent people don't go to jail while guilty people go free. You know, I'm all for making a government that works for everybody. But first, we would have to tear down the government, and then we got to rebuild it. Well, like I said, these rioters, these Republicans are really good at tearing apart the government. I gotta say, I've been watching them tear apart our government for a couple of years now, and they got a lot of good methods to do it, including just charge the White House. That's one of the oldest in the book. Get a bunch of people together and charge the White House on January 6th. That's pretty damn old school. But they got false information, conspiracies, they got organizations, they're putting information out there, they're hijacking news channels. I mean, they are literally doing everything they can to topple our government, and then who's going to rebuild it? Again, the Republicans will choose what type of government they want to establish. We haven't got there yet. The Republicans haven't torn our government yet. You'll know when the government's close to falling when the National Guard gets called in. When the sitting president calls in the National Guard and people are getting shot in the street, that is right about the time where the government has fallen and we're about to rebuild it and the people are sick. Even if the government does stay the same, called the same thing, there's still two parties, it will never look the same. It would be everybody who's involved will be making changes. And that's what we need. We need to topple all this bullshit that's getting in the way. All the problems that are causing America pain and suffering need to be fixed. So we need to destroy all these loopholes and things that the rich have put in to enrich themselves. And we really need to stop enriching them. Like, for instance, we had a great plan. The trickle up. That's where you give money to the bottom and then it gets pumped into the economy. But when they heard this plan, about giving money to the poor at the bottom. Then the poor would spend it on housing, and then that money would be spent at the bank, and then the bank would use that and it would go to the Federal Reserve, and it'll make it all the way back to the top. When that plan was, put forward, you know what Ronald Reagan did? He said, well, how about we give the money to the top and wait for it to trickle down? We'll call it trickle down economics. We just dump a lot of money with the rich bankers and the rich people and the realtors. We'll just give them a lot of money, and then they'll build stuff for the poor, right? They'll help out the poor. We'll call it trickle down. Screw this trickle up, giving the poor money. They'll spend it on drugs. Well, then it still makes it to the top. If you give money to a drug dealer, and then that drug dealer gives it to his grandmother, and then his grandmother pays rent with it, and then the landlord gives it to the bank, and then the bank puts it into their bank, and then that goes into the Federal Reserve, it's now made it to the top. But they decided trickle down, so they gave lots of money to the top, and they were worried about the bottom spending it on drugs. But what do you think the top spent it on? Big giant houses, yachts, big apartment buildings. They built everything big for the rich. Playgrounds, they got tax write-offs, they tried everything. It never made it to the bottom. So they were worried about people spending it on drugs, but the system would have still worked. The money would have still made it to the top. But yet, they give the money to the rich, and the rich just spend it on stupid stuff. It happens all the time. You complain that, oh, the people at the bottom will spend it on drugs. Not if their rent is due and the snowstorm is coming. They'll go fucking and begging for the drugs, and they'll pay their rent. But you know what the rich guy will do if you give him money? Stick it in his bank account. If you give a billionaire $1 million, he's not going to decide, I'm going to build a shelter in low-income housing. That is not how that works. You got to have a want or a need to spend that money. So at the bottom, you need housing. You need food. You need help with your drug addiction. You need whatever. So you spend the money on rent. You spend the money on food, and it makes it to the top. It has to be because you need shelter. You need food. But the rich at the top, they have shelter, they have food, they have everything. The only thing they need is a second yacht. So they do not think about that money as, oh, this is going to go to a need and make it to the top. It's already at the top. They're going to stick it in their bank account. You just gave the top more money. It doesn't make it to the bottom. Once when the money makes it to the 1%, they hold on to it. They have enough money to live on. They don't even know how to spend all their money. So it just keeps on coming in and in and in. It doesn't go out to the bottom. It goes to the Federal Reserve, goes to the bankers, goes to the realtors, goes to big house, goes to yacht salesmen. And then it just goes right to the Federal Reserve. It skips all of the bottom. So any money given to the top will never see the light of day at the bottom. Yet they continue to try to blame the hardworking people working 80, 60 hours a week, complaining that they still can't make their rent. I mean, we had people die for the 40-hour work week. We don't have it anymore. The amount that would pay your rent in 1950 on a 40-hour work week, you would have to work 80 hours today if you wanted that amount of buying power. If you wanted to get as much food as you had in the 1950s, a car like you had in the 1950s of the same value, a house of the 1950s of the same value, and you wanted to get these things, and you were getting them in 1950 working as a gas station attendant 40 hours a week, to get those same things, you might have to work more than 80 hours a week today. Because as far as your house, that's going to be ridiculous. So you're going to be working probably 2 jobs. And you're going to be working both of them 40 hours for sure, and you're still barely going to make by. Why did this happen? Because they eroded the 40-hour work week, they eroded minimum wage, and they did it in a real... I mean, come on, the rich did it before. They didn't want to pay us in 1930. They don't want to pay us now. So all they did is slowly eroded the 40-hour work week. They just used inflation. They inflated us out. They inflated our paychecks out. As everything else went up with inflation, the rich decided to not allow the other things to go up with inflation. So wages have been stagnated since 1975. You got the work weeks going skyrocketing. You got literally mothers and fathers, the father working two jobs, the mother working one job, and they're still not sure how they're going to pay the electric bill. This is getting bad. You got people who went to college and can't find a job. And colleges are getting ridiculous as well. So, yeah, I don't know how I feel about Republicans trying to tear apart our government completely, and then we'll have to rebuild it, and the Republicans most likely will be the ones planning to rebuild it. I don't think I like the idea of the Republicans rebuilding it. Not by themselves, not without checks and balances.